At the top of the planet, there's a vast stretch of land where almost no one lives. It begins in Siberia, crosses Alaska, and runs all the way to the far north of Canada.
Millions of square kilometers of frozen ground, blanketed in snow for nearly the entire year.
In a not-so-distant past, those same frozen lands were home to some of the most dangerous animals that ever existed in the northern hemisphere. There was a bear that weighed more than a ton, and standing on its hind legs, reached the height of a second-story window. There was a cat unlike any other, one that vanished without leaving any descendants. There were hyenas, not in Africa, but ruling Europe and Asia for tens of thousands of years. There were lions bigger than any lion alive today, ranging from Europe all the way to Alaska. And there were rhinoceroses covered in fur, built to withstand winters of 40 degrees below zero, all in the same place, at the same time, exactly where almost nothing survives today. And then comes the big question. How did one of the emptiest, coldest places on the planet manage to produce some of the most incredible and dangerous animals in history? The answer isn't found in any one of those creatures alone. It's in the world they lived in. A world that has vanished completely. And that, at its peak, was the largest terrestrial ecosystem on the planet. This exposed stretches of land that connected continents, like Beringia, a natural bridge between Siberia and Alaska. And the entire planet was, on average, 4 to 5 degrees colder. It was in this icy, dry, more connected world that the ecosystem supporting all of it was born. And it began with the ground. The ground of these regions is made of permafrost, soil that stays frozen all year round, year after year. To count as permafrost, the soil has to remain below zero for at least 2 consecutive years, but in many places, it has been frozen for hundreds of thousands of years. Today, permafrost covers about 23 million square kilometers, nearly a quarter of all the dry land in the northern hemisphere. In parts of Siberia, it reaches more than 1.5 kilometers down into the ground. And this is where it becomes special. The constant cold almost stops time. In most places, a dead animal disappears within a few years. In permafrost, it can be preserved for tens of thousands of years, with skin, fur, and even the contents of its stomach. It's like a giant freezer that preserves the Ice Age. That's why Siberia became, in practice, the largest Ice Age graveyard in the world. But not every region preserves fossils in the same way. Most of the frozen mummies we know come from a small part of Siberia, mainly from the basin of a river called the Indigirka, where fine soil and rapid freezing preserved bodies in perfect condition. In these areas, winter drops to 40, 50, even 60 degrees below zero. And there's so much organic matter trapped in that ice, remains of plants and animals that never rotted, that the carbon alone is estimated in the hundreds of billions of tons. That gives you a sense of just how much life this place accumulated over time. But the soil was only the beginning. On top of it, during the Ice Age, lay the largest terrestrial biome of that era, the Mammoth Steppe. It began on the Iberian Peninsula in Western Europe, crossed all of Asia, and passing over the Beringia land bridge, reached as far as the Yukon and the interior of Alaska. It was a near unbroken stretch of frozen grassland that covered roughly a third of the way around the Earth. Tens of millions of square kilometers of a single landscape. And here comes the surprising part. This steppe was not a frozen, barren swamp like today's tundra. It was cold, yes, but also dry and sunny for much of the year. Because so little snow fell, the grass stayed exposed and animals could feed even in winter. The wind carried a fine, mineral-rich dust off the glaciers, which made the soil extremely fertile. The result was a sea of grass, herbs, and hardy plants, far more food than today's tundra can offer. The best comparison isn't with the modern Arctic, but with the savannas of Africa. The Mammoth Steppe fed a quantity of large herbivores similar to the Serengeti, only over an area dozens of times larger and with winters of 40 degrees below zero. Everywhere there were mammoths, wild horses, bison, reindeer, and woolly rhinoceroses grazing on the same grass. It was one of the largest gatherings of big animals the planet has ever had outside the tropics, and it was this that fed the entire chain that came above it. The location of the steppe also helped make it so rich. It sat right in the middle. On one side, the great ice sheets. On the other, cold deserts and mountains. The winds coming down off the ice were dry and brought almost no rain. That's why the soil never became the waterlogged, acidic ground of today's tundra. It was firm, well-aerated soil, perfect for grass to send down deep roots. Cold, dry, windy, and full of minerals. A combination that doesn't exist exactly the same anywhere today. And the number of animals was enormous. By scientists' estimates, woolly mammoths alone numbered in the hundreds of thousands, spread across Europe, Asia, and Beringia at the same time. Horses and bison were probably even more numerous. Because the steppe was continuous, the herds could migrate hundreds of kilometers in search of food. And herds that travel that far support hunters who also need a lot of space, which explains how some of these predators manage to live from one end of entire continents to the other. At the center of it all was the woolly mammoth. It wasn't just another herbivore, it was the gardener of that world. By knocking down shrubs, trampling the ground, and eating enormous quantities of plants, it helped keep the grassland open and full of grass. It lived across nearly the whole steppe, from Europe to Beringia. An adult male reached 6 tons and stood more than 3 meters tall at the shoulder, with curved tusks over 4 meters long. 6 tons is roughly the weight of a small truck, only covered in fur and with tusks on the front. And there were many of them. To this day, ivory hunters pull tens of thousands of fossil tusks out of the Siberian permafrost every year. In 2007, a baby mammoth was found in Siberia so well preserved that it still had its skin, its trunk, and even milk in its stomach. It died more than 40,000 years ago, yet looked as though it had died only a few days earlier. The mammoth didn't roam alone. Across the steppe also passed the steppe bison, stronger than any bison alive today, and Megaloceros, the Irish elk, bearer of the largest antlers any deer ever had, a rack spanning up to 3.5 meters from tip to tip. Together, these large herbivores turned grass into millions of tons of meat, spread across the continent. And where there's that much meat, there's always something that wants to eat it. The first name in this story, however, isn't a hunter. It's one of the prey, but a prey that fought back. The woolly rhinoceros, or Quelodonta antiquitatis, grazed alongside the mammoths and lived from Europe to eastern Siberia. Curiously, it never crossed over into the Americas. In theory, it was food for the great predators. In practice, almost none dared attack a healthy adult. The reason was its size and its weaponry. It weighed nearly 2 tons, had a double coat against the cold, and carried on its snout a flattened horn that, in some individuals, exceeded a meter. It was not a round horn like that of today's African rhinos. It was wide, almost like a blade, and from the wear marks you can see it used it to sweep away snow in search of food, and surely to fend off any threat. The permafrost even gave us a calf of this species. In 2014, in Yakutia, a baby woolly rhinoceros nicknamed Sasha turned up, its fur still in place, revealing a reddish color no one had expected. The next one proves a rule of that world. There, size wasn't everything. The Ice Age wolverine, Gulogulospeleus, was a small hunter and scavenger that lived in the coldest belts of Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Today's wolverines, its direct relatives, have been seen dragging prey 3 or 4 times heavier than themselves and driving wolves and even bears off a carcass. The Ice Age version was even stronger. And best of all, the cold that killed the others was its advantage. When a carcass froze and became too hard for most, the wolverine had the bite and the stubbornness to work its way into the frozen meat. It didn't need to be the biggest, it just needed to be the toughest. When night fell on the steppe, an animal that worked in groups came onto the scene. The cave hyena, Crocuta. We tend to associate hyenas with Africa, but for tens of thousands of years they dominated Europe and Asia. It was larger than today's African hyena, and had, for its size, the strongest bite in all of that world. It could not only tear flesh, it cracked whole bones, and ate the marrow inside, the part that lions and wolves left behind. And it hunted in organized packs, which helped both to bring down large prey and to steal the food of anything caught alone. We know this because they left a clear mark. Caves across Europe filled with bones. Dens crammed with the remains of mammoths, rhinos, horses, and bison, all gnawed and scored by hyena teeth. From the size of those piles, you can tell that a good share of everything that died in that world ended up in a hyena's mouth. At the top of the open ground hunters stood a single animal, and its territory was gigantic. The cave lion, Panthera spelea. It ranged from Western Europe across all of Siberia and reached Alaska and the Yukon. Nearly the entire steppe. It was the main hunter of the large herbivores, the animal that controlled the herds of bison, horses, and deer. And it was a true lion, a cousin of today's African lions, only about 25% larger and with a thicker coat for the cold. The name cave lion doesn't come from where it lived, but from the paintings humans made of it on walls, as at Chauvet in France, where lions were drawn more than 30,000 years ago. But the permafrost gave us something even more striking. Between 2017 and 2018, in Yakutia, 2 frozen cave lion cubs turned up, nicknamed Boris and Sparta. Sparta, about 28,000 years old, is considered the best preserved Ice Age animal ever found. Skin, teeth, tissues, and even the internal organs were still there. Boris is even older, at more than 40,000 years. And the ice even preserved a hunting scene. In Alaska, the mummy of a steppe bison nicknamed Blue Babe was found, with the claw and tooth marks of a lion on its back and muzzle, and even a piece of lion tooth broken off during the attack, which happened more than 35,000 years ago. Not every great predator of the steppe hunted in the open. The cave bear, Ursus spilius, lived more in the mountains and caves of Europe and Asia, and led a life quite different from the others. Analysis of its bones shows it ate mainly plants. It spent the summer devouring vegetation to fatten up and survived the long months of hibernation through the frozen winter. In size, an adult male ranged from 400 to 1,000 kilos, on a par with the largest brown bears of today. But the most impressive thing about it is the numbers. Some caves in Central Europe accumulated the remains of many thousands of these bears over generations of hibernation. In some places, there were so many bones that, in the 20th century, they were even mined for use in the chemical industry. There's even a cave in Austria, called the Dragon Cave, with the remains of thousands of these bears. So many huge bones that, in the Middle Ages, people thought they belonged to real dragons. The cave bear's struggle was not so much over hunting as over shelter. It competed for the same caves as the first humans, and it's no coincidence that skulls of both species turn up in the same places. Even so, there's still debate. Some finds show signs of meat consumption in certain populations, suggesting a more opportunistic animal than the image of a pure herbivore might suggest. On the American side of the steppe, the dominant great carnivore was a different one. The short-faced bear, Arctodus simus, lived across North America, including the part that connected to Siberia through Alaska and the Yukon. Scientists still argue about how it made its living. To some, it was a scavenger that muscled carcasses away by sheer size. To others, an active hunter of large herbivores. Either way, when it showed up, everything around it changed, and its size was terrifying. Unlike today's bears, it had long, slender legs, more those of a runner than a digger. Standing upright, it reached about 3.5 meters tall, and the largest ones exceeded a ton. It is most likely the tallest bear that ever existed. Some reconstructions suggest those long legs may even have let it run fast in open ground, though that's still debated. And there's one last one left, which is also the strangest of them all. Homotherium, the scimitar-toothed cat, was a pursuit hunter that lived across almost the entire planet: Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. For a long time, it was doubted that it had arrived so late in northern Asia, until a recent discovery in the Siberian permafrost put the doubt to rest. In North American caves, like Friesenhahn Cave, the remains of these cats were found alongside heaps of milk teeth from baby mammoths, a sign that they may have specialized in hunting the young of the steppe's largest animals, probably in groups. And its body looked like no living cat. Its front legs were long and powerful, its hind legs shorter, its back sloped, and its upper teeth were short, flattened, and serrated like little blades, made to slice meat, not just to pierce. Everything about it points to an endurance hunter, one that chased its prey down rather than simply ambushing it, the way today's big cats do. And it was precisely Homotherium that starred in one of the greatest discoveries ever made in permafrost. In 2020, in the basin of the Indigirka River in Yakutia, the frozen mummy of a cub of the species was found, a baby just 3 weeks old, preserved for more than 35,000 years, with fur, claws, and front paws intact. Even the whiskers were still there. The study, published at the end of 2024, showed it was quite different from a lion cub of the same age. The mouth opened much wider, the ears were small, the neck was nearly twice as thick, the front paws were long and broad, almost like snowshoes, and the fur was dark. The scientists wrote that for the first time in history, it was possible to truly see the face of an extinct animal with no living look-alike in the world today. Homotherium left no descendants. The entire lineage vanished, and with it a type of hunter that exists on no continent today. And here's the most important point. None of these animals lived alone. All of them depended in one way or another on the same food-rich grassland. When a single large herbivore died, it fed several at once. The meat went to the lion, the bones to the hyena, the scraps to the wolverine. Access to the carcass was contested by the short-faced bear, and Homotherium fought for a piece on the edges. They lived in the same regions precisely because they all fed from the same source. It was a single world, linked by the food that flowed from the grass to the herbivores, and from the herbivores to the hunters. And this world collapsed quickly by geological time. At the end of the last ice age, starting about 14,000 years ago, the climate warmed fast. The air grew more humid, it rained and snowed more, and snow began to pile up on the ground. It sounds like a small thing, but it was enough to change everything. The dry, nutritious grass that fed those great animals was smothered and replaced by moss, shrubs, and waterlogged forests. Far poorer food. The great steppe broke into pieces and shrank. The engine that drove that world simply stopped. And there's more. Many scientists think this change wasn't the climate's fault alone. The large herbivores themselves helped keep the grassland open. By eating, trampling, and fertilizing the soil, they kept shrubs and trees from taking over. When those animals began to disappear, the grassland turned to scrub even faster, an effect that fed on itself. Fewer animals, less grass, fewer animals. And the collapse didn't happen all at once. In some regions it took a few millennia, in others, isolated pockets held on for far longer. At the same time, a new force was arriving in the north. Human beings, ever more widespread and with steadily better weapons and hunting techniques. To this day, scientists argue about which mattered more, the climate or the hunting, or the two together. But the outcome is clear. When the large herbivores dwindled, the base of the chain gave way, and everything above it fell with it. The cave lion, the cave hyena, the cave bear, the short-faced bear, and Homotherium disappeared one after another. Some mammoth herds still held out in isolated places, like Wrangel Island, where they survived until about 4,000 years ago. But the world that sustained them had ended long before. What remained was the landscape we see today. The tundra of Siberia and Alaska holds only a tiny fraction of the great animals the steppe once had. It's the same land, at the same point on the map. What changed was the world that existed on top of it. But down below, the record of all of it is still kept. The permafrost still preserves bones, mummies, footprints, DNA, and whole bodies in a frozen archive tens of thousands of years deep. And as the planet warms and the ice melts, that archive is opening up little by little. Discoveries like the Homotherium cub appear precisely along the banks of rivers that crumble every summer. Each one helps to reassemble, piece by piece, this lost world. And that's what makes these places so striking. Not for what they are today, but for the difference between what they are now and what they once were. The regions that are among the emptiest on the planet were home, during the last ice age, to the greatest concentration of large animals and great predators in the northern hemisphere. The end of the ice age swept away nearly all the great mammals of the far north, in one of the largest disappearances of large animals in the last few million years. The ecosystem ended, and with it, the animals that depended on it. But the record of that world is still there, beneath the ice. And it keeps surfacing. The quietest, emptiest places on the planet today were once some of the most dangerous in the history of the Earth.